Domestic battery at its most basic. In Indiana, domestic battery is described as a person who knowingly or intentionally touches a family or household member in a rude, insolent, or angry manner. Domestic battery as an A misdemeanor carries a maximum potential penalty of up to 1 year in jail. But it also can have a lot of negative implications on your life. If you're convicted of domestic battery, that means you are going to lose your gun rights for a minimum of 5 years. Additionally, if you're convicted of domestic battery and do the same thing again to that same person, what would be originally an A misdemeanor can be upfiled to a level 5 felony because you have a prior domestic battery conviction against the same person. So while domestic battery in Indiana starts as an A misdemeanor, the consequences of a conviction for domestic battery can go far and beyond just that A misdemeanor and can really negatively impact your life. Now let's break down domestic battery in the statute. So knowing or intentionally, that's pretty understandable. We all know what that means. If you do something knowingly or you do something intentionally, it means you meant to do it to that person. Now let's talk about family or household member. The easiest way to think about domestic battery and the most common thing is husband versus wife, wife versus husband. However, that's not the only domestic battery, but it also can mean a person that you're dating or have dated, engage in a sexual relationship with the person, if you're related by blood or adoption to the other person, if you're related by marriage to the other person, if you're the ward of another person, a foster parent of the other person, or a guardian of the other person. Now the next part of the statute says touches. Well, that can mean a variety of things. And in Indiana, a simple brushing up against someone, if it's done in a rude, insolent, or angry manner, can be construed as domestic battery. So let's start with the touch. Touch, again, can be a brush, it could be a push, a punch, but it could also be spitting on someone. Bodily fluids can also be a touch, which could lead to domestic battery. Kicking someone, there's a variety of things. Basically, any sort of touch, whether it's a punch that leads to injury or a simple brush that doesn't lead to injury, if it's done in a rude, insolent, or angry manner, the state can charge you with domestic battery. Now, you might be thinking, well, accidents happen all the time. Are you trying to say if I accidentally bump into my wife, is that domestic battery? And usually the answer is no. But that's where the rude, insolent, or angry manner portion of the statute comes into play. Now, a lot of times we can tell whether something is rude. If you guys are in an argument and you push her, or you're in an argument and she pushes you, then you can basically say, okay, that push was in an angry or rude manner. So the context is going to matter significantly in these cases because something as simple as a slight push in the right context could either be an accident or it could be domestic battery. And again, even with that slight push, if the state can prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, you're found guilty of that. Even though it was a simple push, there's no injury, that domestic battery conviction is going to cause you a lot of pain and heartache as your life progresses. Because again, it's something that's going to stick on your record for at least 5 years. You're not going to be able to own any sort of firearms. And if you already have that domestic battery conviction and a couple years go by and you and your spouse get into another fight again, and again, it's just a simple push, because you already have that domestic battery conviction, that next push could be a level 5 felony. And with level 5 felony, we're talking about prison time. Level 5 felony in Indiana carries a maximum amount of prison time, 6 years. So typically what happens in Indiana is if the police are called for a domestic incident and someone is arrested, what will happen usually is the state will file domestic battery charges against that person. And almost immediately what's going to happen is the state's going to ask for a no contact order to protect that person that they think was the victim of a crime. But they can also ask for no contact orders for people that were around in the house as well. So if you have children that were in the house at the time of this alleged incident, there might be no contact orders not only for your spouse, but for your children as well. So something as minuscule as a little argument that led to a push, even if there's no injury, can make it to where you can't go to your house anymore. You can't talk to your spouse anymore, and you can't talk to your children anymore while the case is progressing. Now, a lot of times we'll get calls saying, hey, I've been arrested for domestic battery. There's been no contact orders issued against my spouse and my children, but I'm hearing from friends or family that my spouse doesn't want this no contact order. What do I do? Well, a lot of the times, even if the person that is the alleged victim is not requesting a no contact order, the state is still going to file that, and it's more than likely going to go into place. So there's a couple ways to get no contact orders lifted. The easiest way is if the person that's protected by that no contact order goes to court in front of the judge and asks that it be lifted and gives reasons to why they do not believe that a no contact order is needed. A lot of times we see this if it's a third party calling. So you have a neighbor, they hear an argument, they call the police. Now your spouse didn't call the police. Your spouse might not have even wanted you arrested, but the police are going to come, and if they arrest you, the state of Indiana is going to ask for no contact orders whether or not your spouse or your children or anyone else in the house has requested it. But if you can hire an attorney, your attorney can try to get those people into court if they do not want that no contact order, try to get it lifted as soon as possible. Because again, even if your spouse doesn't ask for that no contact order, if it's granted, that's going to prohibit you from going home, being with your spouse, being with your children, and it's basically going to upheave your life until you can kind of get this all under control. But the criminal justice system does not move quick. It's not something that's going to happen immediately overnight unless you get an attorney on board as soon as possible. If you have questions about domestic battery in Indiana, or if you're facing domestic battery charges, please give us at the Marc Lopez Law Firm a phone call, 317-632-3642, and always remember, plead the fifth.